The season's about to start in less than a week, and we got one trade that's in the books and another one that's brewing that are my absolute favorite kind of trades. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. And today's episode is being dropped on the second day of April, 2022. Yes, you're getting your full 5 episodes this week, and you're going to be getting 5 episodes throughout the season and through or basically through Christmas time. So you get 5 doses of Sully per average a week, average per week. I don't know. You know what? Let's just trust me. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're available on all your free podcasting catchers. If you got a smart device at home, be sure to tell it to play podcast Locked On MLB. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pod. Same handle on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter. Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. So let's talk about the one trade that actually happened, because there's another trade that, as of this recording, it's just before 7 a.m. on Saturday that I'm recording this, and I was hoping to wake up to see that this trade was completely in the books, but alas, they're still mulling it over. I think the trade that's being mulled over makes a little bit of sense. But let's talk about the one trade that we know took place, and that is a trade between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Chicago White Sox. A fierce rivalry between those two teams, especially when you consider that they were the opponents in the 1959 World Series, and lots of bad blood. Now, this is my favorite kind of trade that happened between the two teams. Both teams had a need. The Dodgers had a need in their bullpen, especially with the loss of Kenley Jansen. Let me get to that in a second. The White Sox, suddenly with the injury of Vaughn, have a huge need in their outfield. Well, this is the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. You got my peanut butter and your chocolate. You got my chocolate and my peanut butter. Sadly, Reese's Peanut Butter Cup is not a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network, but the two teams saw that each one had a piece that could fill that need. And so we saw happen on I believe it was on late Thursday or early Friday. Either way, I learned about it early on Friday, that the White Sox and the Dodgers swapped A.J. Pollock for closer Craig Kimbrel. And I think this is a smart move for both teams. I like that both teams had this need. We're able to just flip and sort of try to fill in the holes, as it were, right there. Now let's just talk about the White Sox are going to plop in A.J. Pollock, a right-handed power hitter, 20 some odd home runs a year. He hit 16 home runs in the truncated season of 2020. His OPS is reliably in the 800s. He has a little bit of speed. He may strike out a little too much, but he's cut down on his strikeouts, a big deal. And he's had health issues, obviously, in his time with he had 1 or 2 full seasons in Arizona, but he's had trouble staying on the field in his time with Los Angeles and Arizona. But he's also been a productive player. And in the World Series in 2020, he was part of the team that won for the Dodgers there. Last year in the NLCS against Atlanta, he won a batting .381. His OPS was over 1.1, hit a pair of home runs, drove in 7 runs in the 6 games. And he is, he's in his mid-30s, but the White Sox are not asking him to be the superstar of the team, nor the leader of the team. They have Jose Abreu and Tim Anderson for that. In some ways, this is the ideal type of place to plop AJ Pollock in the middle of it, because he's not being asked to be the star. He's asked to be a power hitter, a Gold Glove outfielder, and someone who will provide depth for the team. And I think that's super smart move for the White Sox. They had a need, and they filled it with, say it with me, a major leaguer. The White Sox are clearly trying to win right here, right now. Now, the White Sox also have picked up a bunch of relievers in the offseason that gave him a little bit of depth in the bullpen. And the Dodgers wound up picking up Craig Kimbrel. Now, my feelings of Craig Kimbrel are somewhat complicated. I'll be the first to admit that. No one is going to prevent me from saying that, whatever you do. Now, there's no getting around the fact that Craig Kimbrel has had a wonderful career. He's been a relief pitchers tend to flame out after a few years, and he is now entering his 13th full season in the major leagues. Now, 4 straight years when he was with Atlanta, he led the league in saves in the early 2010s. And saves are, I think, an unreliable and overrated metric for relief pitchers. When you take a look at some of his numbers, there's a year he struck out 127 batters in 77 innings in 2011. In 2013, when he was left dying on the vine and not brought in a key situation against the Dodgers, he struck out 98 batters, walked 20 in 67 innings, and throughout the 9 earned runs all season. His ERA, his first year, his ERA was under 0.5 when he was a middle reliever in 2010, and just consistently had super low ERAs. In his first year in Boston, or actually his second year in Boston, the 2017 season when they won the division, he had another just spectacular year where he struck out 126 batters in 69 innings. Now, he also had a wonderful season on paper in 2018 with the Boston Red Sox, where he saved the 42 games, struck out 96 batters in 62 and a third innings. His ERA was higher, but he was still an all-star and all this stuff. He was the rookie of the year back in 2011 with Atlanta. But it's a bad sign when Red Sox fans were chewing their fingernails to the bone every time he came out. He had a horrible postseason. His ERA against the Yankees in the division series was over 11. And he constantly put the Red Sox in situations where, it took a brilliant catch by Andrew Benintendi to save one of the games against Houston. And it's kind of telling that when the World Series needed to be clinched, Alex Cora turned to Chris Sale to come out of the bullpen instead of Kimbrel. It's also telling the Red Sox didn't offer him a contract and he was floating around. Now, that was that weird offseason where it seemed no one wanted to sign anyone long term. But, Kimbrel had a terrible couple of years with the Chicago Cubs, 2019, 2020. He was awful. Then he had a great half season with the Cubs last year, where he was back to his old form. The White Sox picked him up, and he was awful for the White Sox. And this is a red flag for me. This is a big red flag. This is a guy who's thrown a bunch of innings as a reliever, struck out a lot of batters as a reliever, and relievers flame out, even the best ones. A point I've made many, many times. When a relief pitcher dies and their career falls off, I mean, not literally dies, but when their effectiveness dies, it's usually not a gradual decline. And we're seeing exactly that with Craig Kimbrel. He's gone from all-star superstar closer to ERAs in the 6, save for a half season in 2021, where he made the all-star team again, got back to form, and then fell right back in. Now, fortunately, the Dodgers could afford to have a player like Craig Kimbrel in case he falls off a cliff, that they do have a ton of pitching and depth, and they could move some pieces around. But I actually like the White Sox, what they got in this trade more than the Dodgers. Now, I could be proven wrong, and Kimbrel could become very effective, and they could use him in a non-closer role. They could use him as a closer. If he finds his groove again and has another terrific season, I could have egg in my face. If AJ Pollock gets injured, I could also have egg in my face. But just sitting here right now with the season about to begin, I think the White Sox, who got Kimbrel to give them depth, to give him a long postseason run last year, it didn't work out. And they flipped it for a player like AJ Pollock to give them the depth and to have them overcome some of the injuries. I like the deal. I like it a little more for Chicago than Los Angeles. But what I like about it, this is a good old-fashioned trade. It's like a baseball card trade. I have doubles of this. Can I give you this card for that card? It's like a fantasy baseball trade. It's not filled with all sorts of payroll ramifications and everything like that. It's an old-fashioned, I have a need, you have a need, let's flip them. And again, I could look back and look really dumb at the end of the year that I felt that the White Sox got the better end of this. And I don't think anyone got fleeced. I think in the end, both teams improved. The only reason why I think the White Sox got a little bit of an edge on this trade is I have more confidence that A.J. Pollock will be a productive player in 2022 than I do in Craig Kimbrel. But I actually think both teams did well. There may not have been room for A.J. Pollock on this team. And believe me, the Dodgers have an unbelievably deep farm system and deep pockets and are willing to do it. The Dodgers want to win another World Series, and they want to win it in a 162-game schedule. You know what wouldn't surprise me? It wouldn't surprise me if Clayton Kershaw becomes the closer of the LA Dodgers. You heard it here first. He has come out and closed some games. He came out and closed both the 2016 Division Series and the 2018 National League Championship Series out of the bullpen. And he pitched very well in Game 7 of the World Series and the controversial Game 7 of the World Series in 2017 out of the bullpen as well. That being said, this is a trade that I love to have because it's the kind of trade that baseball fans fantasize about. Not complicated, not crazy, just two teams trying to fill needs. Both of them needed a little boost. Both of them needed a little bit of energy to fill in some holes, and they both may have got what they wanted. And guess what? If you need a little boost of energy, you may grab yourself a Built Bar. You know, as we enter spring, a lot of people have forgotten about their New Year's resolutions. I haven't. I'm still eating healthy. I'm still trying to make the right choices. And guess what? One of my resolutions was to not eat bad foods, which is why I enjoy a Built Bar. And you know what? They're so good. They taste so amazing that you forget you're eating something healthy. By the way, have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best Built Bars ever. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors, including coconut marshmallow, cinnamon churro, and banana cream pie. These are going to be some of your favorites. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, the Puffs included. 100% real chocolate, low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. Typical candy bar could be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to built.com, scroll down to the macros chart. You're going to be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, and low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Forget the candy bars. The Built Bars have so many flavors. Whatever you want, they've got them. Mint brownie, coconut and almond. My personal favorite is raspberry. And this month, you're going to have white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and they have new flavors coming out all the time. If they think of flavor and they think that might be good, they're going to make it. It'll be delicious, and it'll be good for you. At Built Bar, it's all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, the other trade that is currently floating around in the ether, maybe by the time this podcast gets published, it will either have happened or it will be shut down, is a deal between two teams that have a sense of urgency. The Mets and the Padres, two teams that looked like they were headed for the postseason last year, then had disastrous final months where not only did not make the postseason, not only did they make the wild card, they wound up finishing with losing years. Both teams have gone all in to have their seasons, their 2022, be the season that turns everything around, including bringing in veteran managers who have taken multiple teams to the postseason, but are missing that final piece of their resume, which is a pennant and a World Series title. You give Buck Showalter or Bob Melvin a World Series title with their current resume, and people are talking about them or would talk about them as a Hall of Fame manager. That's just the truth. By the way, in some ways, it would be really intriguing if the Astros made it back to the World Series and played either San Diego or the Mets, because then you would have Dusty Baker against either Bob Melvin or Buck Showalter. And in each of those cases, you'd have a manager who has been a bit of a Johnny Appleseed of postseason appearances, but none of them have clinched a World Series title as a manager. And I think that if Dusty wins a World Series with the Astros, or Buck wins a World Series with the Mets, or Melvin wins a World Series with the Padres, I think you would have to look at their resume and say, yeah, they've checked every box. Rehearse your speech. Well, the Mets made a bunch of moves, and of course, their entire plan for becoming a pennant contender in 2022 is to have the combination of DeGrom and Scherzer dominate at the top. They acquired Bassett. They have other pitchers in the rotation, but it's DeGrom and Scherzer is hopefully, in the Mets' point of view, their answer to Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling in 2001. Well, that all relies on Scherzer and DeGrom staying healthy. Last year, Scherzer, in his time with both Washington and Los Angeles, I thought could have won the Cy Young Award. He didn't. Burns did, and he had a fantastic season in Milwaukee. I probably would have voted for Scherzer, especially how incredible he was down the stretch with LA. But remember, for the first half of the season, it was DeGrom Cy Young to lose. His season looked like it was going to become a historic one. But then he got injured. And by a strange coincidence, the Mets' chances fell apart. Well, DeGrom's hurt again. And it doesn't look like it's about missing a start. When they start saying he's going to be missing weeks, and it's someone who has had some major injuries recently, red flags right there. That's more red flags than a parade in North Korea. And so you've got to be able to say, what are we going to do? The Mets have pushed all the chips to the center of the table. They're willing to pay the luxury tax. They're willing to fill in all the holes. And so if you remove Jacob DeGrom for any amount of time, you got to make sure there's a major league pitcher sitting in there. Now, the Padres have, they lost Tatis Jr. for a chunk of the season. I have a feeling he's going to come back and probably have to sell his motorcycles. One of the things they've been really desperate to do is shed the contract of Eric Hosmer, as he no longer really fits in their plans, even with the universal DH kicking into the National League. The trade that seems to be brewing about right now, Ken Rosenthal, Dennis Lin, everyone's been writing about that there is a potential deal involving Eric Hosmer going to the Mets. Now, he doesn't really have a position for the Mets right now, but the Padres also have Chris Paddack. Now, I know Chris Paddack, and I've been following Chris Paddack pretty closely for the last few years. Why? Because I had that weird thing I was doing for years where every single time there was a Padres game, I predicted that pitcher was going to throw the first no-hitter in the history of the San Diego Padres. I did that in the 2019 season, every single game of the 2020 truncated season, and the first month of 2021, until Joe Musgrove finally threw the no-hitter and gave me a viral tweet where a lot of people said, how did you do this? How do you do this? And I inadvertently had created a little social exercise where you test the power of prophecy, where I made a very specific prophecy that was going to happen. And it just so happened I was doing it every single day, and eventually it was going to happen. But I've actually been not necessarily eventually was going to happen. It hadn't happened for 50 years. I could have been doing it for 50 straight years. But along the way, there was a bunch of Joey Lucchesi and a bunch of other pitchers for the San Diego Padres that I got to know and follow pretty well. And Chris Paddack was one of them because he pitched 26 games in 2019, 12 games in 2020. So each one of those starts, each one of those 26 games in 2019, each one of the 12 starts in 2020, and the first handful of starts in 2021, I predicted he was going to throw the first no-hitter in the history of the San Diego Padres. Now, he is a young pitcher. He is 26 years old, native from Texas, and he was a huge prospect in the San Diego Padres system. He was supposed to be their big stud ace that was going to be developed from their farm system. And it would look like it was a absolute steal that the Padres made in 2016 when they traded Fernando Rodney to the Marlins and picked up Chris Paddack, young player. This looked like one of those instances of flipping a veteran for a young player was really going to help. And his first year with San Diego, 2019, at age 23, he had a fine season. He struck out 150 batters in 140 innings. Don't necessarily look at wins and losses, but he won 9 games and his ERA was a solid 3.33. He was not as effective in the truncated season, and he was not effective at all last year. His ERA ballooned to over 5. He lost his one game that he started in the playoffs against St. Louis in 2020. But I like the Mets making a move if they do this, because Paddack could be a player that A, could benefit from a change of scenery, B, could benefit being around someone like a Max Scherzer, and also have zero pressure coming in and say, you're going to be our number 4 or 5 starter if everyone's healthy. Even if you're missing DeGrom, you're talking about your 3rd or 4th starter at this point. And to have a really talented young pitcher in your system and to be able to do that and have possibly to turn things around and fulfill that promise and do it in a pitcher's ballpark and not have to be the ace or the number 2 guy on the team or the number 3 guy with Bassett around, I think this could be a fantastic move for the Mets. Absolutely. Now, what will it cost him? It looks like it's going to cost him Dominic Smith. Now, I don't think that's the biggest chip in the world to deal with. I mean, you have Mark Canha and Starling Marte that they acquired. Brandon Nimmo is hanging around, and maybe Dominic Smith would have gotten maybe Dominic Smith will be pretty good and be able to be the DH or give them some space there. But the fact of the matter is that there isn't necessarily a spot for him on the team. And that could be a nice piece for the Padres. But the main thing it would cost is picking up the contract of Eric Hosmer. Eric Hosmer is aging. He's been on the decline the last bunch of years. He doesn't really have a ton of value right now. Since signing that huge honking contract with the San Diego Padres, he had 1 year where he hit a bunch of home runs and he's been healthy. He's been stable, the Gold Glove first baseman, but he's been every year, whether you want to use traditional stats or sabermetrics or whatever you want to use, his value has been going down each year. And that he doesn't really fit with the Mets. I mean, I guess where he would fit is, if he would either be the DH, if Pete Alonso was hurt, you have him at first. It gives him a little bit of depth. They already have Eduardo Escobar who can move all over the place. Jeff McNeil can move all over the place. He doesn't add much value. He adds a ton of value to the Padres to remove that contract. But the main thing is, as I mentioned before, is the possibility of Chris Paddack blossoming. Now, there is a precedent for this, of bringing in a potentially solid pitcher, potential with this other case was with an ace potential, but bringing in a broken down veteran with a World Series ring as part of the price of making that deal is when the Red Sox traded Hanley Ramirez, Anibal Sanchez, and some other players to bring in Josh Beckett. The anchor in the deal was bringing in Mike Lowell. Now, everyone knew that Beckett's job was to become the ace to fill the hole that's been sitting there since the loss of Pedro Martinez. But Lowell and his huge contract had to be picked up. Now, it turns out that the change helped Mike Lowell a great deal as he became a solid player with the Red Sox, winning the World Series MVP in 2007. And I can't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, a change of scenery would maybe give a little bit of a jolt to Eric Hosmer. Either way, if it means bringing in a young pitcher for the Mets, I think it would be a smart move. I think it would be a smart move for either team. Now, and I think it would be a surefire bet that the Mets would look up and be thrilled that they brought in a young pitcher like Paddack and hope that he can blossom with the Mets. And if you're going to make any bets, go to BetOnline. It's your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Master Championships and the NCAA tournament. Go UConn, my mom's alma mater. Podcasts, reviews, and all the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Hey, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospect should be your second listen. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep in the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, I think Dominic Smith would be a nice pickup for the Padres. I wonder if Luis Guillorme might be a better one. He is a kind of a jack of all trades infielder, and with the loss of Fernando Tatis, at least for the first part of the year, bringing in a player like Guillorme might give them a little more depth, a little more versatility in their infield. But that being said, Dominic Smith is an interesting case, like Chris Paddack, that maybe a change of scenery might be exactly what he needs. Dominic Smith has been someone since he was a first-round draft pick out of Junipero Serra High School in California. He was a number one pick, 11th overall, and has shown flashes of being the solid player. In the COVID season, he got a couple of votes in the MVP, finished 13th in your MVP race. Thank you very much. Has shown he's had some power, shown he has some ability, has not shown he's been able to be on the field, has not shown he's been able to stay healthy. But again, maybe a situation where him in a new playing situation without the pressure of being the number one pick, and maybe also with the Padres shedding that giant payroll and being able to start fresh, you know what? Maybe that's exactly the type of situation Dominic Smith needs to be in. What I'm saying about both the trades between LA and Chicago and this trade between San Diego and New York, I think both of them are deals that make sense for all the teams involved. Jacob Grom right now is having an MRI for his shoulder. He's going to be shut down because of the stress in his shoulder. And so they need another young pitcher. The Padres need some salary relief and a little bit of depth in their lineup. The Dodgers need depth in their bullpen. The White Sox need depth in their outfield. And anything in baseball that will give us trades like this, instead of tanking, instead of dumping salary, instead of just doing cynically moves that are there just as cost-cutting, these are moves to make the team better. Yes, even dumping Hosmer's salary is there to make the team better because it will give them flexibility to make moves later. I love trades like these. These are fun. These are fun, and we're starting to see the rosters take shape. I wonder, though, it's always interesting when a player joins a team and a fan base whose collective hearts were broken by the player. In the 2015 World Series, in that exciting and for Mets fans brutal Game 5, where they were on the verge of sending the series back to Kansas City, and the Royals rallied against Matt Harvey, and then there was that wild play where Hosmer was at third. There was a slow grounder to third base. David Wright made the play, checked Hosmer back to the base, and then threw to first. And the second David Wright threw to first, Hosmer broke home. And the first baseman kind of threw a panic throw to home plate that went wild, that tied the game. And the Royals went on to win the game in extra innings and clinch the World Series. And it was a gutsy, daring move by Eric Hosmer to run at that point. And every Met fan in the world knew the minute he slid over home plate that, oh my God, the Royals are going to win this thing, aren't they? And it was some gutsy, daring move by Hosmer to pull that off. By the way, more baseball like that, please. Some daring base running risks. You know, I like to see that. I know it was a risky move to make. It was exciting. I like exciting. Now, there's virtually nobody left on the Mets from the 2015 World Series team, but I just wonder if Met fans remember that. I know they remembered it that night. And I hope you remember to listen to us every day as we're posting a new podcast all the time. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about the trades that are going on and loving every minute. But this is Locked On MLB for the second day of April 2022. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.